In the following, I would like to explain how, from the point of view of Germanische Heilkunde, it can happen that a man's breast produces milk. The Associated Significant Biological Special Program, SBS for short, belongs to the morsel conflicts controlled by the brainstem, yellow group. As always, the essential theory first. Among other things, the pituitary gland produces the hormone prolactin, which stimulates milk production. As is so often the case, the underlying conflict can be deduced from the biological function alone. Since the biological function of breast milk is to nourish the child, it is easy to imagine that the content of the conflict must have something to do with nutrition. Dr. Hamer defined it with the words not being able to feed the child or the family. As with all SBS, the conflict takes place completely synchronously on the three levels of psyche, brain, and organ. Dirk-Hamer syndrome, DHS for short, start the conflict active phase. In the psyche, those affected have obsessive thoughts about how they can adequately provide for their child. Everything stays with them. In the brain, you can see the active Hamer focus in the brainstem. This ensures that the glandular tissue in the pituitary gland multiplies organically, tumor grows. The increased number of cells results in increased prolactin production. This is also the biological meaning of the program. The increase in prolactin allows those affected to produce more milk. There's more milk available for the family or the child, i.e., more food, which ensures a better supply for the family child. This sounds absurd from today's civilized, messed up perspective, but from Mother Nature's point of view, it is an intended aid. Take a look at this painting by Barbara Kraft from 1797. A woman is handing her breast to a man who is obviously ill. So milk was not only used as food, but also as a remedy. Exciting, isn't it? If the conflict is resolved, those affected enter the healing phase. Psychologically, they are now liberated. The child or family have enough food again. In the brain, the Hamer focus is repaired by means of fluid retention and glia. If the Hamer focus is discovered, conventional medicine speaks of a brain tumor or brain metastasis. Organically, there are two ways of healing. Non-biological healing takes place without microbes. In this case, the tumor is simply encapsulated and remains. If this is discovered after the SBS has expired, it is referred to as a benign tumor. During the biological healing, the corresponding bacteria become active. They break down the previously grown tumor. At the end of the healing phase, the tumor is cleared away and a cavity lined with calcium carbonate, remains in the tissue where the tumor used to be. The affected person now has slightly less pituitary tissue than at the beginning of the SBS. And now to the question of whether men can breastfeed. The above painting was published in the Wiener Zeitung on February 7, 2007. The article Milk as Medicine states, among other things, the phenomenon of adult breastfeeding was conspicuously present not only in everyday medical practice but also in the visual arts. It should be noted that a number of historical sources show that women and even men who never gave birth were capable of breastfeeding in special cases. There are other reports of men breastfeeding. The Talmud tells of a father who was given breasts by God so that he could breastfeed his baby. Alexander von Humboldt reports on a journey to Venezuela. A farmer named Lozano breastfed his baby 2 to 3 times a day for 5 months. Well, but these are Bible and adventure stories from times long past, aren't they? Far from it. In 2002, the AFP news agency reported on a man from Sri Lanka who was also able to breastfeed. He even had twins. In men, rudimentary mammary glands are still present in the breast. Theoretically, he can therefore produce milk. However, in order for men to be able to breastfeed, they must have an active SBS of the pituitary gland, unable to feed the family child, which increases prolactin production and thus makes milk production possible. So breastfeeding men must have previously suffered a DHS that triggered this SBS. Let's look at the above examples from this point of view. We read about the man from the Talmud. It so happened that a husband's wife died and left him with an infant child. However, the family was so poor that the man could not afford to pay a wet nurse for the child. Then the Eternal One performed a miracle and caused the father to grow breasts so that he could breastfeed the baby himself. Alexander von Humboldt's report reads as follows. When the mother fell ill, the father took the child into his bed and calmed it down and pressed it to his chest. Lozano was 32 years old and until then had not felt any milk in his breast. But the irritation of the nipple that the child was sucking on caused an accumulation of this fluid. The milk was fat and very sweet. The father, amazed at the swelling of his breast, gave it to the child and breastfed it 2 to 3 times a day for 5 months. And about the man from Sri Lanka, the children's mother died at birth. So clearly once again, the men will have suffered a DHS of not being able to feed their children due to the death illness of the women, which triggered the SBS of the pituitary gland. Mother Nature is simply ingenious. But what do we do with this ingenious emergency program in our society? Men are given drug cocktails so that they can basically take over the women's job. So much for the men. What happens when SBS starts in a woman? She gets milk, regardless of whether she has children or not. But this has other, partly undesirable consequences. Due to milk production, the woman's body is fooled into believing that she has a child to feed. The increased prolactin level leads to the absence of irregularity of ovulation and thus to the absence of irregularity of periods. An active prolactin SBS of the pituitary gland can therefore prevent a wanted pregnancy. This also makes sense from Mother Nature's point of view, because if I can't feed my family anyway, why should I have another eater at the table? If the conflict is resolved, prolactin production normalizes again and the period returns. Pregnancy is possible again. For example, if a woman has a husband who she has to look after like a child, wants to get pregnant but it doesn't work out, it makes sense to keep pituitary SBS in mind. However, there are of course other reasons why a couple may not be able to conceive. And once again, the question of price. What happens with the SBS in hanging healing? Short build up, more breakdown. Short build up, more breakdown. Short build up, more breakdown, and so on. The pituitary tissue melts away with the result that the prolactin level drops and milk production dries up. As explained in movie The Scientific Table. With germ layer related SBS, the process is almost always the same. Thank you, Dr. Hamer, and thank you, Helmut, for your vivid examples.